Be skeptical and curious with data. This is a look at COVID-19 data from mid-July 2020 by Stuart Sutton. The total new cases in a specific day in mid-July 2020 was a featured news story on most television, print, and social media. Several states were called out for really having large increases in the new case count. States like California took action to shut down businesses. In economics, as well as in health, we make use of normalizing factors to compare data accurately. Otherwise, we incorrectly show figures that misrepresent the data. One way to do that is to normalize data based on population count. The total new cases in a specific day in mid-July 2020, based on the individual state population, shows a very different concentration across the country. As we continue to apply normalizing factors to compare total cases across the nation in mid-July 2020, we see slightly more cases in the New York and New Jersey area. But as we see increased concentrations per capita in Louisiana and Arizona, we also note that Florida has almost twice the per capita cases when compared to California. Let us continue to properly apply the same normalizing factors to compare testing across the nation in mid-July 2020. We see slightly more testing taking place in locations where there were high concentrations of COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths. Applying normalizing factors to compare the total deaths per state by mid-July 2020, we notice the total deaths across the country are concentrated in New York and New Jersey. The large number of deaths in this Northeast have been largely attributed to the reintegrating of COVID-19 infected people within the high-risk populations residing in nursing homes. The worldwide case comparison is where we can begin to see some strange disparity within the recorded figures. The worldwide testing shows differences. Johns Hopkins recommends that testing programs be scaled to the size of the epidemic and not the size of the population. That sounds like reasonable advice, but we notice something significant in the data here. The USA has the largest number of tests per capita in the world. What if we look at the total cases, tests, and deaths that are reported for COVID-19 as a percentage of the total population? Let's limit this to countries where the total population is of 3 million or more. We also include the total recorded deaths for each country in the totals. You can sort this right now, it's sorted by deaths, but we can also sort by the total count. This is typically what's shown in media when we see the data. We see the United States listed at the very top of the rankings, but as a total percentage of deaths within the population, we see that the ranking is not at the very top. The worldwide cases per million is an interesting statistic to examine. It becomes more interesting when comparing countries to individual U.S. states. The size of the boxes shows the total cases per million within the population of that country or state. As a country, the U.S. is ranked 12th in the total cases per million in its per capita figures. But many of the individual states within the U.S. show higher case totals than that of specific countries. Take note of these case counts that mix together the individual states within the USA with other countries in the world. This is just a different projection of the previous graphic. Now, this collection of states and countries is supposed to represent individual data aggregations of the largest number of cases, whether by state or by country. The orange markings are for the US states, and the blue markings are for other countries in the world. And you'll notice the ranking that is shown here, in this section here, is actually indicating a larger concentration, a per capita basis for the states in the United States than the majority of the other countries in the high ranking totals. This is particularly curious. As we continue to look for high quality data we can presume is factual and unbiased, we might consider searching for case counts on the open internet. This is where things get a bit strange. If you pull up a web browser and search within Google's search engine for a specific case count, you will find references to that count, no matter the number you select. Let's try this. You type in a specific number and then follow it by the phrase new cases. Let's do that here. I will just type in a particular number. I'll do 527 new cases. And what I get is a lot of individual news items that are pre-configured to represent 527 new cases. What if I type in a different number? 412 new cases. Same thing. That is showing up everywhere. I can scroll down. I can see multiple occurrences of this. What if I type in 1,211 cases? I'm just making these numbers up as I go. Sure enough, those reports are there too. What if I type in 2,000, just a nice round number, 2,000 new cases? Well, sure enough, 2,000 new cases. No matter what number I put in there, probably within some boundary reason, it always gives me a news item to confirm my fears and my uncertainties and my anxiety over this terrible COVID situation that's gripping the world. Let us not imagine that that's something unique to Google. It's not as if Google has this cornered. You can get the same effect here in Bing, the Microsoft search engine. I can type in 2,147 new cases. And guess what? I will find that. I will find that reference here. I'll find something like 126 new cases. Again, you'll see these references all kind of pre-configured and ready to give you news that exactly conforms to your search. Now, I think if you type in something really crazy like 120 million, maybe that's a limiting factor. Okay, so we're not going to see 120 million new cases. Everybody would hopefully imagine that to be completely invalid. So, but within some reasonable range, it's pre-configured to give you pretty much what you're looking for. So there's an ever increasing number of deaths being attributed to COVID-19 that are not attributable to the virus. A great number of these deaths are being coded for COVID-19 because of the claim that the virus is found within the body at the time of death. That is happening for deaths that are attributed to other factors, and where COVID-19 could be more accurately coded as an extra marker. One of the more egregious examples of this is here in this news article, where a person died in a motorcycle accident, and that was attributed to COVID-19 because they found COVID-19 in the person's blood. So, and it gets even crazier because then some of the doctors who are defending this crazy correlation said that, well, perhaps he had COVID-19 and that's what caused him to crash his motorcycle. It doesn't get any stranger than that. Some of the bad data reporting associated with COVID-19 is being blamed on flaws in testing systems. We have seen multiple accounts of testing data irregularities. Some more significant examples of test fabrications have been reported by nurses at the Georgia hospital, where clean swabs were returning positive results for COVID-19. There's been even examples where people have been showing up in these testing lines and they have turned out of the line because it was taking too long. So they never actually took a test, but they did register online that they were going to that place to take a test. And they get an email the following day that says that their tests have been returned and show them to be positive for COVID-19. Of course, the person never actually took a test. Turns out that even the CDC, which is highly regarded as a source of truth, is making mistakes in reporting data, specifically in conflating antibody tests with those who previously had the COVID-19 and virus and those who are newly infected with the virus. So if you had the virus, you recovered, everything's okay, you typically will have the antibodies. There are some tests that show the antibodies don't necessarily hang around a long time, but you have the antibodies. And then there's a person who's newly infected who has slightly different markers. They're mixing the data. They're saying that both people are infected COVID people, when in fact one person is a recovered COVID person. Again, conflating data for some purpose. It turns out that there are things that we can do better to navigate the ever-changing landscape of COVID-19 data. Mostly we need to use a healthy dose of common sense in gathering and working with the data. There are some specific things that can be done to be on the lookout for, and some of those are listed here. This is especially true for data scientists and analysts that are creating information for decision makers. There's a small number of important and effective actions that we can take to improve our information posture at a personal level. Ultimately, you expect data from trusted sources to be accurate. Recognize that in today's charged and divided climate, that what you assume to be trustworthy data may actually have bias. Be careful out there. The data streets are becoming rougher every day. Continue to be skeptical and curious with data. Thank you for listening.